That could be one of those like stats, like Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak. So they lost to Mexico, so they're in a little bit of peril here. Okay, so there's a movie coming out, Uncle Drew, and my next guest is Nick Kroll, comedian, very funny. I've heard of him for years. I saw him a couple years ago on something called the Spirit Awards with John Mulaney, and there was a 10-second clip. James Corden is the CBS late-night guy, put it out there on the internet, and I have watched it 100 times. Then they did it again. The Spirit Awards are like less of an Oscars, not as uptight, and they do this 10, 15-minute routine that's outrageously funny. Nick's been doing comedy forever. Mulaney's his best friend. Many think Mulaney's as funny as anybody in America today. David Letterman called him that. So the movie is Uncle Drew. Kyrie Irving's in it. Here is a scene from the movie. Very funny.
Yo, how's that geriatric team of yours, bro? You get them all individual life alert bracelets?
Hey, man, are you wearing my clothes?
What?
Yes, that's my shirt. You got on my shirt, man.
That's right. I got on your shirt. Or maybe you got my shirt on.
What?
What?
Wait. That's my
shirt.
You got on my clothes.
Stop it! You're crazy. That's right. I'm crazy. I'm being you. The only way to defeat one's enemy is to become one's enemy.
You're nuts. You're psycho.
I'll see you in the finals, Dax.
Psycho.
It opens June 29th. Our pleasure, Nick Kroll, actor, comedian, producer. Look at Nick Kroll.
Hi, guys.
Look at that picture. By the way, it's actually a great plot to a movie.
Yeah.
That a former legendary playground star comes back at 70. And who came up with it, by the way?
The script was written by a gentleman, Jay Longino, very funny dude. And I'm not sure if they brought it to him or how it happened.
I think they brought it to Kyrie.
Yes. I think the shorts, they did the shorts for Pepsi, and they went viral, huge success. And I think they brought Kyrie the idea of here's how we think we could do this movie, and he was on board. And then they started to put it all together. And it's such a great group of NBA legends. It's crazy.
June 29th it opens. Now, when you film this, here's what's really interesting. Kyrie had just been moved to Boston.
Yeah.
So you're on the set with all these NBA dudes. And were they asking Kyrie constantly, what up? Like, what was it like?
Yeah, it was. So I got there about a week after the trade went down, and Lil Rel Howery, who also stars in the movie, who I was in that scene with, has talked about literally being on set with Kyrie. His brother comes up to him, sort of whispers something in his ear. They finish the take. Kyrie runs off set to celebrate because the trade has gone through, celebrates, comes back, and then is like back into the scene. And it was the dancing scene. There's a very funny dancing sequence where all of them get to dance. I think it was just an excuse to get Shaq on the dance floor.
By the way, Shaq is a fascinating guy. So before we get to Shaq, because you got some stories on Shaq. So when the players were talking to Kyrie was happy with the move.
Yes, he was excited about it.
Did you get it? Did you glean any anti-LeBron feel to it?
No, to be honest with Kyrie, I got there in the middle of production. I gave him a little breathing room.
Yeah.
And no, I didn't sense any anti-LeBron stuff. I think he was just excited. Like, it's a guy who was like, clearly was looking to go somewhere new, and then ends up getting placed on one of the only true contenders that he could go to.
Oh, God, it literally worked perfectly for him.
It really did. And so I think I just talked to him. We were doing some press the other day, and I was just catching up with him a little bit because we're such dear friends. But he was just, it was just fascinating to talk to a dude who, gets traded to the Celtics, has a great year, then goes down, and then has to watch his team go through the playoffs.
That's weird.
And then have to go play the Cavs. And then I was like, you bummed not to be on a team with JR anymore? Which he did not. He avoided answering.
By the way, you're a Knick fan. You were at the Reggie Miller game.
Yes.
So you're a sports fan. What did you make of Shaq?
I mean, he's one of those guys who's, I mean, he is literally larger than life. He literally is larger than life. Like, he feels like he's out of frame even when you're meeting him. He's so large. He looks like they took a regular person and put him in like 125% machine. Like they scaled him up. Like, because he's proportionally, he makes sense.
What do you mean?
Like Kevin Durant or like even LeBron, you look at them and they're like they're crazy looking. I mean, they're not crazy looking. Long and big. But Shaq, everything is proportional. It's just like 125% of the size of a regular person. Like, he rolled up to set in a 4-door car with 2 seats in it. You know what I mean? It looks like he's in a 2-door coupe, but it's not. It's like just a regular 4-door Mercedes. And he's the nicest guy. I'm sure you've dealt with him.
No. He's a very unique guy.
He is. I think he's a guy who has been literally bigger than everyone his entire life. So every room he walks into, he puts everybody at ease.
He diffuses the, oh my God, how's the weather up there stuff.
Yes, and he's immediately puts everyone at ease. He's lovely. I got like a couple hours with him one night on set and just picked his brain. I mean, he's a super smart dude.
Yeah.
He wants to work constantly.
Yeah.
And you talk to him, he's like, he's kind of like, he was talking about, like, he shoots the show for TNT. They do the general commercials in the studio where they do the TNT, and he's just worked it all out, and he just loves to work and is such a nice dude. Reggie, I got to, because I was at that game, the Knicks game, when Reggie lit up the Knicks against Spike, Spike Lee.
Oh, God, yeah. That's an iconic, they've done 30 for 30s on that.
Yes, and I was at that game and so mad at Spike Lee for getting Reggie.
Because you're a Knicks fan.
I was a Knicks fan growing up. And is anybody a Knicks fan now?
It's hard to be.
It's so hard to be a Knicks fan right now.
Yeah.
I've ended up now, because after playing with Kyrie, I did play in the game with Kyrie. When I've started following the Knicks, the Celtics a lot more closely this year.
By the way, Kyrie, the world is flat. It kind of doesn't sit great with me. But other than that, he's just kind of a unique dude.
Yeah. I found him to be really bright, really smart, no on set, no like attitude, no ego. I mean, these guys were in makeup every day for 2-3 hours, and they never complained. They were on time every day. I really enjoyed him, and Kyrie's good in this movie. He's a good actor.
By the way, through the years, I've said this to people. I told you this during the break. Football players are the most mature early because they know their game has some violence. Their careers are going to end. So football players get drafted. They buy a car. They buy a house. They buy their parents' houses. They get married.
Yeah.
And then at like 32, they leave. Whereas hockey guys are the big drinkers and partiers, very European, very Canadian.
Yes. Yeah.
They run the tap dry. Basketball players are the funniest by far because, first of all, a lot of them grew up gawky, 6'8" in 8th grade.
Yeah.
They've been teased. Girls wouldn't pay attention to them. Mm-hmm. Chris Webber you work with.
Yeah, Chris Webber is
funny.
So funny in this movie. He plays preacher.
What's that? What role is that?
He's like a Southern Baptist preacher character. I would do the voice, but I feel like I might get kicked off of television if I do it. But he's super funny in the movie. That was a real revelation. But for me, being with all of those guys, I grew up playing basketball right when the Fab Five were blowing up, and to be with Chris, and he's so funny. And Lisa Leslie is in the movie as well, and she was kind of the mom for everybody. And she was watching her play, watching all those get on the court, and they all got competitive. Like, that doesn't shut off. You're messing around, you're shooting a movie, but as soon as we started playing, Lisa was like, I'm a scorer. She heated up. She started hitting threes.
Oh, God, yeah.
And then, Reggie started missing threes. And I just was, because I'm the bad guy, I'm on the bench, and I'm like, it was a lifelong dream of me to be the white guy in an all-black movie, and so I got to just be yapping away at all those guys, and specifically Reggie, just wouldn't. And then he got hot, and I was like, oh, this is what Spike Lee felt like.
That's what.
Yeah.
By the way, you graduated Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
What do you major in when you're a comedian?
I majored in history. I minored in
the least funny thing in the world.
I know. It was not the. I was not. It was not. But I started doing improv there. I started doing comedy there, and met John Mulaney and a bunch of other really funny people who I still work with. In a way, it was like, for me, that was the thing I got most out of school, was the training for it. It was like, it's no different than playing for Kentucky. But
it is interesting because there is something to be. I'm Norm Macdonald.
Yeah,
I grew
funny.
up. My favorite two comedians growing up were Gary Shandling. R.I.P. I mean,
Yeah.
oh my God. I mean, that was one of the days. Anthony Bourdain and Gary Shandling passed away, and I was sick for days.
Huge bummer, both of them.
And then Norm Macdonald, who's the crazy. I don't even know how his head works. Now, how do comedians see Norm Macdonald?
Oh, he's one of those, there's that phrase of like a comedian's comedian, and I would say Norm is up there as a guy who he's kind of thinking on a different plateau level, and I think people love him, and because some of his stuff is so dry that you're like, I think it might go through some audiences, or it's super mean. But he was a guy who I loved. I mean, when I started doing comedy, he was at SNL and he was doing Weekend. I mean, he was doing Weekend Update during all the OJ stuff.
Oh, good God, it was controversial.
Yeah.
And Don Ohlmeyer, I think, hated it.
Yeah, I think he fired him for it. But for us, he's one of those guys who's just deeply funny and so specific.
Do you buy this thing that comedians are all sad? Seinfeld doesn't seem sad to me. Leno doesn't seem sad.
Well, when you have your own building filled with vintage cars in New York, it might be harder to be sad. I don't know. Aren't we all kind of sad all the time?
No kidding.
Is that what we should get into on this show?
No kidding.
The underlying ennui of existence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think so. I mean, I think it really depends on the person. It's like, I think I think the truth is there is a certain perspective that you can have on things if you're a comedian that can be a little dark at times.
Yeah.
But look, I've hung out with waiters and valet attendants and billionaires, and everybody can figure out a way to be sad.
No kidding. Nick
Isn't
Kroll.
that the message I should leave here?
By the way, Facebook's made everybody miserable.
That is the problem. I do think social media, it's like you wake up to like a
feeling inferior.
Yes, feeling inferior and just being like, oh, wonderful, the detention centers and gas attacks. Oh, what a way to wake up. Nice way to wake up in the morning. Uncle Drew premieres in theaters June 29th.
Lionsgate. By the way, Lionsgate's great. They do a lot of good stuff.
They do. Honestly, and
San Francisco. Do you know that big bridge is 800 feet above the water and 8,000 feet long? Well, it is.